Good afternoon, everyone. We are in the second part of the course, building African entrepreneurial universities in the context of responsive innovation and in the context of responsive innovation and sustainable development. This course would be focusing on the concept of entrepreneurial universities as an institutional concept. Here, we try to situate the entrepreneurial university as the institutional actor in innovation systems. Before then, let me introduce myself. My name is I'm Dr. Do Pascal. I'm a senior researcher with holder in PhD in higher education management from the University of Tampere, Finland. And I belong to the Knowledge Process Resource Group of the Faculty of Science and Engineering, University of Turku, Finland. I would like to say that I have been studying this concept of entrepreneurial universities, especially within the European context, during the past 12, 15 years. Before we begin properly, we would like also to thank the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for having paid during the past 2 years a very keen interest on how this concept of entrepreneurial universities can be applied to Africa. So we thank the whole the staff of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. We also thank the staff of the Institute of Development Studies for all this assistance we've had, and especially the core funding for this course by the Executive Secretary of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa to stimulate these discussions about entrepreneurial universities in Africa. During the course, we shall be answering why would the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa be very interested in the entrepreneurial university concept. This comes as a matter of history because as far back as in 1962, during a conference organized by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, they had expressed concerns about the way African universities were being developed, and they coined the term developmental university. So as we proceed, we start looking at, we start seeing, we start seeing how the concept of the entrepreneurial universities that have been built mostly in the United States and Europe applies to this developmental university or vice versa as an interactive type of university. So what is the rationale for this model? We would note that there has never been, during the past 100 years, been a period when universities have been taken aback by a crisis like the coronavirus, the health crisis, the coronavirus, whereby the most quick decisions that universities take is to close down universities, of course, to curb the spread of the virus. But then before realizing that universities have a key role to play, for instance, in developing the vaccines, in the socioeconomic adaptation strategies. So I think, again, that the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa has been very interested, especially, I mean, everybody now, this becomes clear as to how a health crisis can lead to the collapse of economic systems. So everyone begins thinking how the type of role universities would play in such disruptive and emergency circumstance. And as we see later, we start seeing that some of the features of the entrepreneurial universities would apply when you talk of issues like flexibility, foresight would apply to build a more adaptive university system in situations of emergencies like this, foresight, flexibility, and so on. So we begin answering the question, how can the features of the entrepreneurial universities provide resilience during such circumstances, such as an undertaking culture by the university, a risk-taking culture by the university, foresight, communication, entrepreneurship, economic resilience. Okay. I raised in the previous slide the question, why would Unica be interested in the entrepreneurial university concept? If universities are some of the most, first of all, knowledge-intensive organizations, but they are also there are knowledge-intensive organizations, but they are also budget-intensive organizations. So if universities do not transform themselves, then economic development policies would fall in trouble. Okay, we know about the massification, we know about massification, surging enrollments in higher education, which is affecting the possibility of nation states to finance higher education, and therefore growth policies. So in French, they usually say les organisations budgétivores. So there is some need somehow to get the universities a little bit more flexible. First, very active, position themselves very actively in economic development policies so as to support the economic development policies, but also to transform themselves. Universities have had to start thinking how, as even governments, how do we get this number of persons wanting to go into higher education funded? And we know that higher education is just one sector. Sometimes even it is a subsector of an education sector, which is amongst several sectors of the national economy. We have agriculture, we have defense that compete for budget from the same source, the government. So universities get entrepreneurial to be to position by positioning themselves in economic development, but also by finding alternative sources of income for the university to mitigate this demand-supply imbalance. That is, a lot of demand about higher education, supply in terms of finance, this demand-supply imbalance. So I believe that this second question has been answered. So universities cannot remain only budget intensive organizations. We know, I mean, some scholars, economists of education have analyzed that universities is knowledge budget intensive, because when we think of the staff, the salaries of staff in universities is one of the areas that receives a lot of government budget in terms of salaries. And then we are in a situation where it is a knowledge intensive institution where you train people in education, you don't know when the impact of this education would show. Some impact of research do not show immediately. even though university, especially in Africa, remain one of the key knowledge institutions. So we move on to the next slides. So we will be seeing that the concept of entrepreneurial universities have developed in the West, so there is still a depth of evidence. There is still a depth of evidence. There is still a depth of evidence based. There are very few studies that have been conducted, very few reviews. I think in a second part of this project, we shall, the United Nations Economic Commission also is developing some tools to be able to assess the entrepreneurial orientation of African universities. So there is, first of all, very few reviews that have been taken. There are very few research. In this benign state of affairs, we see that, okay, one of the first study that was done, and we see later that the methodology was questioned, was done by Burton Clark after he did the major European studies of 5 universities to see how they became entrepreneurial. He went beyond Europe to find out how African universities were becoming entrepreneurial. He went to South America. He did the same study in the Catholic University of Chile. So in Africa, the first study that has declared a university as entrepreneurial is Clark 1998. Clark 2000, the first one in Europe took place is published in Clark 1998, and this second one in Africa, Makerere University, is in 2004. Okay, I myself personally, though 2004, sorry, I must correct this. Though 2012, I conducted some studies in Cameroon to check their entrepreneurial orientation using the 5 pathways that had been developed by Burton Clark. There is also some studies have been carried out in Ethiopia by a colleague, Goromsa, and one of the recent publications, Mudel and colleagues on Ethiopia, and then Bo Porika on Namibia. So one of the main problems here when we talk about entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial university, is that the current policy have been narrowed down. Current policy and even research in African university have been narrowed down to the concept of entrepreneurship or graduate employability. So this is one of the step from which we shall be moving on to discuss about the entrepreneurial university. The focus of this model is on the entrepreneurial university as an organizational concept. So our teaching material is basically research-based, based on the European cases, the OECD, and some emerging patterns of in African countries. We use a case study in most of the presentation. We use a case study approach. We study the different pathways by which other universities have become entrepreneurial. The course was initially meant to be asynchronous, but we felt that it was easy to also have some interactive sessions. So this participants shall be informed about these interactive sessions, which will come along to explain so many things, to deepen the knowledge of the participants, about entrepreneurial universities. During these interactive sessions, we bring in top experts on several topics that concern entrepreneurial universities to clarify. And it is also during this session that we bring answers to some of the questions that have been posed on our survey link. We clarify the doubts of the participants. And I must say that I am acting more like a scientific facilitator, because we bring, like the cases in Finland, we bring top experts that have been either part of the policies, or like such as vice rectors, or have done enormous research. When we mention Burton Clark, we have even people here that either were in the universities that clarified Burton Clark, how the universities were going entrepreneurial. So these interactive sessions will be very, very important will be very important. But we ask, because our participants are busy people, that if they cannot attend these interactive sessions, then they should rely on the asynchronous course material. So we have an interactive peer dimension. We also believe there are participants, many of our participants, especially our officials from the universities, that have experience either from their universities in Africa or some other universities from which they left. Maybe it could be some of those top universities in the United States that also they can share this experience. So this is not really about teaching. It is about the exchange of knowledge to see how we can build a framework for entrepreneurial university development in Africa. So as I say, I merely act as a scientific facilitator to get this course, bringing on board different experts that can explain different approaches by which Africa would move to the next phase of entrepreneurial university development. So it is divided into 7 sessions. Session one is focuses on the key conceptualizations, philosophy. We now start talking that the university is no longer porous. The university is no longer closed as it used to be. Some people have called it the ivory tower, where the university was not very connected to the society. So we are moving now in a period, or within a philosophy of the open system dynamics of universities, where the borders of universities have become more porous than before. We will be looking at the building blocks, what constitutes entrepreneurial universities. We also look at some factors, some operational systemic frameworks that favor the entrepreneurial university. We have the national innovation system, regional innovation systems, we have community innovation systems, we have triple helix, and today there is much talk about the quadruple helix or the quintuple helix. Module 4, session 2, we present the earlier entrepreneurial university case studies in Europe that have been very documented. And it is this study by Burton Clark that constituted the basis of the OECD reforms about how to transform universities entrepreneurial. So we look at the different universities. There were several universities. There was universities of Strathclyde, there was Warwick University, there were Chalmers universities, there was University of Joensuu in Finland, and yeah, we look at the different universities and the case studies, what accounts for them to have been transformed. Module 5, session 3, looks at the OECD framework. So many countries now in the OECD and the European Commission since 2012 have been adapting to an OECD European Commission OECD framework, which lays down guidelines how universities transform themselves to be entrepreneurial. And therefore, increasingly, many African universities are showing interest to use this same framework. So we look at how this framework can be adapted. We discuss, because participants will read the OECD framework. We urge participants to read the full OECD framework so that we can make this course session very, very attractive, looking at how it can be adapted, in which context it can be adapted, and what are the problems. So we look at some of the problems that we have generated in a current publication. Okay. We have also done studies when it comes to Module 5, Session 4. We have also done studies in Africa on the different patterns of entrepreneurship in different African countries. So Session 4 presents this, and the result of this study falls within an emerging strand of the research on entrepreneurial universities, which shows that there are potentials to use existing patterns of entrepreneurship in African universities to develop a more organizational and institutionally steered entrepreneurial university or entrepreneurial transformation. There are also issues of leadership and funding of entrepreneurial universities. So this would be discussed in Session 5, Module 6, Session 5. And also we look at one of the sessions, one of the longest sessions of the narrative you have is about the Finnish model of entrepreneurial university transformation, how Finland has moved from a strictly welfare state to entrepreneurship, society development, and how Finland boosts entrepreneurship. As we know, this is interesting from several perspectives. As we know, Finland is one of the first knowledge economies in the world. As we know, many people are keen to see how Finland, which was a poor country by the 1990s, suddenly transformed itself to be one of the knowledge economies. Within this course also, we look at institutions in Finland that have decided to make themselves entrepreneurial universities. And then we would go down in this course to look at different programs by which different universities in Finland are using to boost student entrepreneurship and therefore an entrepreneurial society. Module 6, Session 7 is described as academic and youth entrepreneurship. During this session, we bring in our colleague from Ghana, which is one of the countries also that is doing well, is advancing in this notion of academic entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial university concept, and also in the boosting of student entrepreneurship. This part of the course has been written by our colleagues from Ghana, one of the African Union experts and consultant, Professor Rosemond Bohene, and Dr. Nina Afriye of the University of Cape Cape Coast in Ghana. We felt that it was necessary to bring a balance between the Western model that Finland portrays and the Ghanaian case. And also, by the way, I would also like to say that our colleagues also are members of the German Africa Platform for Entrepreneurship. So they share some experiences also on North-South cooperation on entrepreneurship issues, because if employability is one of the key issues in Africa, then entrepreneurship is increasingly becoming one of the core area for for cooperation to share patterns, approaches, and models as to how different countries of the North and the South are transforming to an entrepreneurial institution or entrepreneurship system or student entrepreneurship